Welcome to our November webinar, which tonight features Cath Bashforth from Forestry England, talking about the Cropton Beaver trial, and particularly since it's been running 5 years, what the findings have been so far. Just before I begin, just want to go through a couple more things. For those of you who joined our October webinar last month, which was Sean Atkinson of the Woodland Trust, and was all about creating woodland through natural regeneration and natural processes. That recording's now on our YouTube site, and you can access it through the website as well under the resources section. But it was really just to let you know that Sean's actually written a follow-up blog for us that I'd really encourage you to read, particularly if you're looking to establish woodland that might fit with the Northern Forest project, and particularly the Grow Back Greener grant funding program within that. So check that out under the resources section or on the YouTube page. And her blog is actually under, there is the Rewilding in Action section. So as you know, for many of you who join us regularly, we are a charity. We are funded solely by donations and occasional small grants. If you are able to donate to us tonight, if you go into the supporters section on the website, you'll find the links through to make a small donation. And we also have our Wild 100 Club as well, which is worth checking out. Little teaser, you might have seen it in the rolling slide deck that we had at the beginning, is our next webinar, which we've penciled in for January the 7th. Keep an eye out on the events webpage for that, and also if we have any newsletters go out between now and then. Just a little teaser, features eagles and Northern England, including Yorkshire. So on to tonight's presentation. So very lucky to have Cath Bashforth. She has been involved, or at least back in April 19, there were 2 beavers released into an enclosure in Cropton Forest, which was part of Natural England's a Natural England licence trial. And it was the first time beavers have been in Yorkshire for over 400 years. Since their release, the beaver colony's grown a bit. The beavers have made the site their own through different behaviours, different engineering. And the main aim of the trial was to see how beavers interacted with the man-made water courses, slowing the flow of structures, and various studies that have been conducted throughout the 5 years of the trial that have looked at the hydrology, the water quality, and the biodiversity on the site. So, Cath, if it's okay, I'm going to hand over to you. I'm going to briefly introduce you as an ecologist for Forestry England and the project lead for the Cropton Beaver trial. So if you're all ready, off you go.
I am. Thank you very much for having me here tonight, and thank you for everybody who's come along to listen to me talk about beavers. So just let me share my screen and then I'll start. Hopefully everybody can see that. So as John said, I'm here to talk about the Yorkshire Beaver trial in Cropton Forest. We're 5 years on from the beavers being released. So we've got lots of results to share with you and so show you. A little bit of an introduction to the trial. It's oh, you're not seeing how do I get? Oh, I'm very sorry. I'm not very good with technology. My screen's moved, but the one I'm sharing hasn't moved.
Just give it a second, Cath. Sometimes it takes a moment to catch up, and sometimes it might need a different setting with the way we're sharing it.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody. Hopefully I'll become a little bit smoother as the evening goes on. So it's a 5-year trial licensed by Natural England. It's fully enclosed. It's a 10-hectare site in Cropton Forest, and it's licensed by Natural England. Within the enclosure, there's a variety of habitats. There's 824 metres of watercourse, and there were 2 old ornamental fish ponds that was part of an old estate grounds. And it's part of the Derwent catchment above Sinnington. It's got a mixture of woodlands in there, some sort of conifer woodlands, but also some birch and beech woodlands as well. So there's a variety of different habitats there. It's working very slowly. So it follows on from the 2007 Slowing the Flow project, where several man-made dams were put in the catchment to slow the flow of water from the upper catchment and reduce the risk of flooding downstream. When that project came to an end, there was no funding for the maintenance of these structures going forward. So the main aim of the trial was to see if the beavers would adopt and maintain those structures, or whether they'd build their own structures which did the same equivalent job of slowing the flow. We also took the opportunity to do a baseline survey of many different other species before the beavers were released to see how they responded to the beaver activity throughout the trial. So a pair of Eurasian beavers from Scotland were released into the enclosure on the 19th of April 2019. They've been very successful in breeding. You can see they had 2 kits in 2019, 2 in 2020, 4 in 2021, 2 in 22, and 1 in 23 and 2 in 2024. So an average beaver family will have 2 to 4 kits a year. And this is the most productive enclosure in the UK. 4 juveniles have been relocated to other projects. More will be relocated this year. So typically beavers will live with their family for at least 2 years before they disperse. If the territory is big enough, or that as they're in an enclosure they can't disperse, what we're finding is that they're living as an extended family group, with just the original beavers being the dominant breeding pair and the others sort of mucking in, helping bring the kits up, so they're still all living as one family group. So what have the beavers? Oh no, first of all, I'm just going to show you a few close-ups of the beavers undergoing their health checks before they're moved on. So here you can see them on the vet table. This is one of the juveniles. He's 14 kilograms, and you can see how they're adapted for a semi-aquatic lifestyle. So they've got the really thick, dense fur. They've got their webbed feet for swimming, their tail for swimming, and they've got these really strong teeth, which are reinforced with iron, which gives them that orange colour. And they're continually growing, but the back wears away faster than the front, so that they've always got that sharp chisel-like point on them. So here it is on the table. So now we'll get on to showing you what they've been doing on site. So they've been really busy, and they started work as soon as they moved into the site, making the site their home. The first 2.5 years of the project, the beavers concentrated on the area around the old ornamental fish ponds that were part of the old estate grounds. These have become very silted up and overgrown. This is what the top pond looked like before the beavers were released. And then this is what it looks like now when it catches up. So they've opened up the pond to a lot more light. They've coppiced and felled the trees around the pond. This area has sort of gone through several changes throughout the 5 years of the trial. The first year, the beavers found the leak in the pond and they dammed it, and it filled up by about 1 metre. So it was just one big pond. And then they dug a channel that drained the pond out, which is quite sort of strange for beavers, because beavers typically try to raise the water level because they feel much more comfortable in the water level. But when they drained the pond out, we found that they'd blocked the inflow of the inflow of the pond had been blocked by silt, so whether the water was getting stagnant and wasn't moving, and that encouraged them to drain it. But then they've now since partially dammed it again. So what we've got a mosaic of deeper pools, and we've got channels throughout the pond and marginal vegetation growing in between. So we've got a much more open mosaic of habitats. So the next picture I'll show you when it comes up will be of the bottom pond. So this was again very silted up and overgrown. It's was being overtaken by willow scrub. You can see it's very dominated by the water lilies and the duckweed. So they've raised the edge of the pond by about 50 centimetres. Beaver's optimum depth of water is between 50 and 70 centimetres. And they've reconnected the river with the pond. I'll show you their dam. So this is the start of their dam. This is the sort of the last phase of their dam. The first phase of the dam, which you'll see in a second when it catches up, was built in the river. The picture on the left shows what it looks like not long after release. So they raised the water. They built that quite quickly to raise the water level to build their underwater entrance into their lodge, which was in the riverbank. The first year it stayed practically level, just level with the riverbanks, and in times of heavy water, the water would rush around the side. In the second year, they started building phase 2, which was out across the floodplain over to the pond, and then in year 3, they started raising the edge of the pond by about 50 centimetres, like you saw in the picture before. So this was built in 3 phases, and it's what now is the largest beaver dam in England. It's over 2.5 meters tall at the end in the river, and that the reason it's that tall in the river is to get the depth of water that they want at the far side of the pond. So they've created a very nice large water body for themselves there to access their territory. Another picture, and it's become a living structure. So there was a big clump of irises in the middle of the pond, which the beavers have split up and planted along the dam. So they're now growing, whether that's so the roots grow into the dam and strengthen it. They do eat iris, so are they farming it, or is it to provide cover going forward to offer protection for them? So after 2.5 years of concentrating in the top part around the pond, they started moving their efforts further downstream. So this is the second dam that they built. This one's got a really nice, strong foundation of stone. So they built a stone wall in the river first, and then they started adding the sticks to it and the mud. And you can see in the bottom picture how the impact that it's having when there's a lot of rain coming. So instead of just rushing down that one channel, it's now spilling out through the conifer plantation to the right. So this conifer plantation, this dates back to when Forestry England's sort of main aim was to create timber as a reserve for the National Timber Reserve. We planted trees in lots of places where we wouldn't plant them now, so close to watercourses. This timber is not economically viable. There's no access route to get it out. So this is one of the areas that I really wanted to see if the beavers would have an effect on this area. So they've by raising the water levels around the spruce, and you can see they've been bark stripping around the bottom of some of the spruce. They haven't chewed any further. They're really sappy, so I think that puts them off. The trees are becoming dying, so they're becoming standing deadwood. They're losing their needles. A lot more light is getting down through to the ground. So we're seeing different vegetation appearing in the ground layer. So they're restructuring the forest. So instead of just being a tall single story conifer plantation with nothing underneath, it's starting to change. So this will be a really interesting area to watch going forward. And then down at the top, they've reconnected the river with the floodplain. So you can see the dams at the top of the picture here on the left. And instead of just running down one channel and going from A to B really quickly, it's now spilling over the dam and traveling around the sides. And then it has to go through all the vegetation at the sides of the river to get back into the channels. So it's taking the speed and the power out of the water, and meaning that it takes longer to get through the site. So I just want to show you this little video because as well as dam building, it was also digging. So this This is the beavers. Oh, I think I'm going to. My connection might be too slow. You might not get to see the beavers. We'll give it a second, see if it catches up.
Yeah, bear with it, Kath. I think people would happily wait a moment to see this, but
So yeah, as well as building the dams, the beavers dig channels or canals. So this one here, they're digging the ponds on the left and the rivers on the right. So they're digging a canal between the pond and the river, so that they can travel from one place to the next without leaving the water. They feel a lot more protected in the water from predators. So even though in this country they don't have predators anymore, you'd be looking for an adult beaver, you'd be looking at a bear, a lynx, or a wolf. Although an otter, a beaver, or a fox would take a kit, you're looking for a bigger carnivore to take a big these channels throughout the country to get from it and also to access food. Just like a little bit. And this is the channel today. And from the pond to the river, you can see that perfect width. It almost looks like it's been dug with a spade. That's a beaver trap there that you can see in the left, and this is the depth of it. So it's quite deep. So this is some of the research that's been undertaken. We've been working with several universities throughout the trial. Exeter University have been one of our key partners. So they've been doing the hydrological monitoring, look at the speed the water travels through the site. We've also been doing water quality and some drone imagery. So the drone imagery has been really fantastic, showing how the site has changed throughout the period of the trial. So this is pre-beaver. You can see that the pond at the right hand of the screen, it's very much silted up, not much open water. And then you can just about pick the river up going down through the site. This is 2024. You see we've got a much more bigger water body, a lot more open. You've got the top pond. You can actually see the river very clearly. You can see the build-up of water behind the second dam. And you can see at the bottom of the site, because they've also started using the bottom of the site now, and they've built another significant dam at the bottom of the site. So you can see that's turning into sort of wet woodland area as well. So the drone imagery shows a real clear picture of how the site's changed throughout the 4 years. This is showing how the surface water has changed as well, again by Exeter University using those drone images. And there's this is a quick video of flyover of the site. So it's quite an extensive site. We're just coming up to the bottom of the site now, where you'll be able to see where they've been doing the damming at the bottom. So these are some of the results from Exeter University's water flow monitoring. So they've had water meters at the top of the site, within the site, and at the bottom of the site. And this is showing how the impact of before the beavers were in and after the beavers were in. So you can see that the beaver are reducing the peak of the water flow through the site. So the red shows before beaver and the blue shows after. So you can see it's a lot steeper peak before the beavers were released. This next graph compares water level above the site to water levels below the site, and it shows the reduced storm flows and increased low flows, indicating that beavers have helped to create a much less flashy regime. So the water moves slower through the site, but also retains within the site longer during the drought period. So when we had the really dry summer, the river within the enclosure still held quite a lot of water because it was being slowly, the dam is not leak proof, so it slowly releases water to maintain water within that river throughout the drought. So this next slide shows water quality above and below. So the turbidity levels on average were lower in the water leaving the site compared to the water entering the site. The beaver dams trap and store the sediment. So in conclusion, in combination with the pre-existing infrastructure of the site, the beavers are increasing water storage, they're attenuating the downstream flow regimes, and they're trapping large volumes of sediment in the water. We also worked with Forest Research. So Forest Research were the organisation behind the Slowing the Flow project. So they did a comparison of the man-made dams versus the beaver-built dams. So they were assessed this last year. They undertook an assessment to see if the beaver dams were doing the equivalent job of the man-made dams. And so here are the results. So in combination, the 4 beaver dams provide significantly more storage, more potential storage than the timber bunds in their current condition, which is which one? The red line, and the green line is the beaver dams. However, they fall short of providing the storage that the bunds provided when they were originally installed. So when the bunds were new, they perform better than the beaver dams do currently. But it's showing that the dams over time, the man-made dams over time deteriorate, and so the beaver dams are now providing more storage potential than the man-made dams. And this difference is likely to further increase as the timber bunds continue to deteriorate and the beavers potentially build more dams and reinforce their bigger dams. So we wanted to see if the beavers would adopt and maintain our dams, and for the 5 years of the trial, they completely ignored the timber dams and they swum under them or they went round them. But in September this year, they've actually started adopting one of the man-made timber dams. You can see where they've been pushing material up and silt up against the man-made structure. So watch this space as to what effect that has on the water storage in the site going forward. So we've also been working with the University of Leeds. They've been doing some laser scanning of the site and also fixed point photography, looking at how the dams have developed over time and how the geomorphology of the area has changed. So their surveys repeated every March, and the data used to quantify pond level, the beaver dam height, and the profile and the extent of the surface water. So we've got some fantastic technology. I haven't got time to go in detail into all the results that we've found, but we are producing a booklet which will go over this in more detail. So here's some of their fixed point photography. So the squares are the same tree in each picture, so you can see how the site is changing. There's an increased water level throughout the site. Some more fixed point photography. We did have a dam breach in the storm in February this year, which is reflected in the March pictures here, but it shows you clearly the sediment that has built up behind the dam as the water's been travelling down through the site. The beavers have since restored the breach, repaired the breach, so the water levels are back up to what they were before then. We've also been working with the University of Teesside. They've been looking at some of the botanical monitoring. This graph shows how the composition of vegetation in the main pond has changed over time, from a pond that was very dominated by 2 species to one with greater diversity and less species dominance, so a more balanced ecosystem. This is the next diagram is a Sankey diagram produced by, again, the University of Teesside. So this is showing how the site has become more complex since the beavers have been released. So instead of just that single strand of river, you've got a multi-braided river, you've got transition wetlands, you've got ponds, you've got more ponds, and you've got sort of less dry land. So you've got a much more complex habitat since the beavers were released. They've also been doing some work with the University of Hull. They've been doing some eDNA surveying, which is fantastic. If you've not heard of it before, it's absolutely amazing technology. So you can gather samples of water and do various extraction filtration techniques, and it will tell you everything that has come into contact with that water. So you can get an idea of what species. So they did it from several sites within the enclosure, and they did a control site in the Pickering Beck in Newtondale. So they haven't processed all their samples yet, so we haven't got all their results through, but this is the initial results showing that there's a greater diversity of invertebrates within the enclosure than outside the enclosure. That's because there's more diversity of habitats, there's more niches, there's more different kinds of spaces for different creatures to inhabit. This is another diagram looking at vertebrates, and it's showing that the mean Shannon diversity was significantly higher within the beaver enclosure, and there's a clear difference in community composition between the Cropton enclosure and the Pickering Beck. So we had some fantastic volunteers doing some bat monitoring. And this has shown quite an interesting story. It's showing that the bat activity, so we monitored the bats in several different ways. We did a transect through the site, and we put static monitors in 3 different places in the site for a week in June, July, and August. At the top end of the site by the pond, bat activity has increased from about 3,000 calls a week to almost 12,000 calls a week. The bat detectors are sort of at capacity there and can't detect many more. Bats are a key indicator of the health of the habitat. It's more open, there's more insects, there's more food resource for them. So the area where the beavers have had the most activity, bat activity has increased significantly. Middle of the site, where the beavers haven't really had much of a great impact as yet. That's the middle graph. Bat activity has stayed quite steady. At the east of the site, where the beavers have only just recently moved in, the bat activity stayed quite constant. Beavers moved in the winter 2023, and bat activity sort of jumped up this summer, again potentially in response to the beaver activity, more water, more insects, more food resource. We've got bat boxes at Keldy, so we've got 30 years worth of data from these bat boxes, and we're seeing an increase in number of bats using the boxes throughout the trial, and we're also seeing noctules using the boxes for the first time, so we're getting an increase in numbers and an increase in species. So we've seen a dramatic increase in amphibians recorded in the site. Before the beavers were released, there were just 6 clumps of spawn in the bottom pond, none in the top pond. Now you just can't count it. It's just one big mass of spawn, and there's frogs and toads everywhere. We've got massive increase of otter footage. And herons, we get pictures of the herons in frog season just stood in front of the camera for hours eating frog after turd after frog after turd. We've got fantastic footage of owls taking turds, rats wrestling with turds and frogs. So this increase in the amphibians has led into a knock-on effect and an increase in the higher up the food chain. We've had an increase in numbers of damsel and dragonflies recorded. We've got new wetland habitat hoverflies. There's an increase in ground flora due to tree felling, more open areas, more light, enabling more species to grow. It's greater standing and fallen deadwood, which is again an insect food resource, which you see the knock-on effect going up the food chain. And we've seen an increase in small mammal species. So before, at the beginning of the trial, we were just picking up generally bankful and wood mice with the odd shrew. This last year, when we did the trapping, we got water shrew, pygmy shrew, common shrew, bank vole, field vole, and wood mouse. So we've got the whole range. Perfect habitat for the water shrew. It's fantastic that they've moved into the site.
So we've actually seen little otter cubs on the site, which we'll see in a minute. The beavers are typically quite defensive against otters. We've got a lot of footage of the beavers chasing the otters away, but the otters obviously don't know. I think we've actually become quite tolerant of the otters as a
Cath, we're struggling a bit with your audio when the video's on as well, probably because of bandwidth. Do you mind just try turning your video off for a moment? Put it back on at the end, just to save a bit of signal. Keep the video on playing, the camera that's on you as an individual, if you could flick that off, it might save a bit.
I didn't hear what you said, John, but I wasn't really saying anything very interesting.
Carry on anyway.
I was just saying that beavers are typically quite defensive of otters because an otter will take a beaver kit. And in the first few years, we were seeing the beaver sort of chasing the otters. You'd get an otter running past the camera, and the next clip would be a beaver running past the camera as fast as a beaver could run. But they seem to have become more tolerant of each other. So you saw on the clip before last that the otter was right behind the beaver, sort of following it, playing with the twig that it was following. And this last clip that I've just played is actually quite remarkable. There were two otter cubs around the base of the dam. That was actually Mrs. Beaver carrying the otter cub up towards the lodge, and then the other otter cub following. We do know they survived their experience with Mrs. Beaver because we've got them on camera the next day and then going forward as well. So I don't think that's ever been recorded anywhere before. Apologies if anybody knows if it has been. So what's the future of the trial? We're keen for the beavers to stay in Cropton due to the huge success of the project. Beavers are a protected species in England, but they're not allowed to be free living in England, apart from the approved populations in the River Otter, and I think there's a few other approved populations down south now. Our enclosure licence has been extended until April 2029, and we're awaiting to see what the government decision will be on free living beavers, as to see which direction the trial will go going forward. I'd like to say a massive thank you to all our volunteers who helped to work on the project. So that's all the wildlife monitoring volunteers, but also the fantastic fence checking volunteers who walk around and check the fence twice a week and clear the grill for us. They've all been amazing, and without them, the project wouldn't have been possible. To our funders and also to Flamingo Land for helping with the health checking and holding of the beavers before they're being relocated, to all the universities involved. So just thank you to everyone that's helped to make the project a success it has been. And I'll just finish with a few more of my favourite beaver clips, and then I'll answer any questions that there is. That's me. Thank you very much for listening, and sorry about the stiltedness with the slowness of the connection. And yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks, Cath. That's quite remarkable. Yes, thanks for bearing with the tech. It was certainly worth us waiting for them to catch up, because that was astonishing. We've had some webinars that have focused just on nature itself, some that have sort of told a story, bits of science and tech, or about engagement of different groups, and you've covered all of those things in that, so thank you. Got loads of great comments in the chat. I think I say all those different elements you covered. I think you got most people with the videos at the end. Wouldn't surprise me. Oh, crikey, the number of questions has just jumped up to 11. So we'll start through those.
No complicated ones, please.
No, that's all right. I'll save those and ask them to John later. You said early on about the number of kits per year, and that the beavers at Cropton were quite productive. Do you have thoughts about what that's down to?
I think it's just perfect habitat for them. There's lots and lots of food resource for them. So it's just, yeah, I think it's just down to the Yorkshire water.
Going on from that then, the water quality entering the enclosure, that's not controlled in any way, is it? That's just what's incoming down the beck?
It's just what's coming down the beck. I mean, it's not a highly agricultural area, so the water quality isn't too bad anyway. But it is the beaver dams are reducing some of the sediment that's going through the site, but that's just sort of naturally picked up.
Thank you. with the number of young kits increasing and the site potentially at some point carrying on exceeding capacity, would kits go potentially to other projects in Yorkshire? We're aware of some that are planning to enclose beavers, but do they tend to go further afield, or might they stay around?
So that we work closely with the Beaver Trust when we're relocating the beavers. They've set up a beaver stud book for enclosures, and the idea is to try and disperse the beavers around the country to increase the genetic variance as much as possible. So the juveniles that we've moved so far, one went to Enfield. Unfortunately, he did pass away, which is you know one of these things with translocations. Unfortunately, it is stressful for the animal. One female was paired with a Scottish. She went to Norfolk Canal Reserve. She's had babies, so she's very happy with her partner. And then this last year, one of our beavers went to Lincolnshire and one went to the Forest of Dean. So they are sort of dispersed around the country, and we'll take advice from the Beaver Trust about where other individuals will go whilst we're in an enclosure situation.
Okay, and thank you. And you mentioned that the adults are the same sort of dominant pair that started off there. At
Yeah.
some point, one of those will either stop breeding or die, I guess. Would one of the juveniles from that pair take a place as the dominant one? Or?
I think they probably would in an enclosure situation. The beavers are very territorial, so we wouldn't want to introduce another beaver into that enclosure. So it would be a juvenile, but it's what you see in a lot of animal species. You see it in you know rodents. Inbreed all the time. Lions, you know, succeed each other with family members, so it's natural.
Thank you. Just trying to group these a bit. Has Forestry England plans to introduce beavers on any other sites, given how good they are as ecosystem engineers?
So I can think of lots of areas within our forest where beavers would be absolutely fantastic. Our policy is to sort of keep open riparian corridors, and the beavers, you know, would help us to do that. But whilst the law is what it is, with beavers only being allowed to be released into enclosures do take a lot of managing for the health and well-being of the beaver, and also for the you know the structure of the enclosure needs to be monitored closely as well. So whilst our position is that whilst beavers are only allowed to be released into enclosures, then we wouldn't be looking at more enclosures in the Yorkshire area.
Thank you. As I say, we know some of the large sites are, but yeah, no surprise that Forestry England have put their resources into this one and keeping that one going. Lot of findings from the science from different universities. Is that expected to be published in publicly accessible ways at some point?
Yeah, so we're just currently pulling that all together into a public facing booklet. So, and then the university have written more technical papers behind that. So once the booklet is produced, that will also be show you where you can get more information about the studies, and it will also be available on the Forestry England website.
Hopefully in time for Christmas.
We're hoping that'll be spring next year.
Okay. I was going to say hopefully in time for Christmas for those that never know what to get their partner, but
no, not quite.
not quite yet.
But I'll let you know, and then you can let your members
promote it certainly. Thanks,
yeah.
Kath. You mentioned volunteers and some community stuff. Could you expand a bit on sort of the engagement work that you did as part of the project and that's ongoing?
So before the trial was started, we did some consultation with local communities, and that's where we attracted a lot of our fence checking volunteers from. So they're sort of local people. We've a lot of the wildlife monitoring volunteers are from local societies, so like the local mammal group or Rydal Naturalists or Scarborough Field Naturalists, North Yorkshire Bat Group. And then we unfortunately haven't had the capacity to be able to do many public or school general guided visits around the tour, and we were kind of in two minds about that as well, because the first 5 years at least was a significant scientific trial, and if you have a lot of disturbance, then the beavers don't behave naturally. So it was partly due to capacity and partly due to the nature of the trial. But we have taken a lot of sort of special interest groups, like we've had groups from Yorkshire Rewilding, we've had Natural England, Environment Agency, Yorkshire Wildlife Trust National Park, or then other estate owners or farmers that may be thinking of beaver or other things as well. So we've had Castle Howard, we've had the Denton Estate, Broughton Hall, you know, so we've done a lot of engagement throughout the trial.
And yeah, I've managed to go twice, which I'm really grateful for, because much as you bring it to life with the slides and the videos, just being there and feeling that environment is something really different. So I'd recommend to anybody else of the 150 or so that we've had on this evening, if you get the chance to visit a beaver enclosure, I would very much say go for it. Some of these you've covered already. Do beavers have much effect on rhododendrons on the site?
So we did map the rhododendron before the beavers were released. They've chewed a little bit. They've used a little bit in their dams where they've raised the water level. It's flooded it and sort of killed it off in some places, but they've not had and they've created a few little paths through it, but they've not had a significant impact. It's not one of their, you know, they've not eaten it, so it's yeah, unfortunately they've not had a significant impact on the rhododendron.
Sure. I'm jumping around a bit now because there were a couple of questions about, are you liaising with Castle Howard, but you already have said that you've given them a tour round, so that's great. Are there fish species in the pond, and has that range and number changed, or have you not monitored fish?
So we did fish. So in the river there was brown trout, there was bullheads and lamprey. And those species are still there. We've seen footage on camera of heron eating much bigger trout than we caught when we were doing our electrofishing surveys. So, which suggests that the pond is providing a you know, a fantastic growing habitat for the trout. The whole eDNA surveys actually, which I'm quite surprised at, have actually found carp and tench in the pond, but I'm not sure I believe that. So it'd be interesting to have someone come and have a fish in the pond and see what they could catch in the pond, if there's any willing fishermen.
Okay, there's one here about the effect on the flow. Comment that somebody was at a Cumbrian Rivers conference and somebody there said beavers don't really do much for slowing the flow because they try to maintain the water level. What you've shown here seems to contradict that comment, which I would agree with. I think you've shown evidence that from direct measurement there is a change in the peaks and an increase in the base to modulate the flow. Yeah,
I think that's the thing. The pond is not always full behind the beaver dam, so there's capacity there when it rains for the pond to fill up. But it does. You can see it with your own eyes. Instead of just running down that one channel, it's spilling out everywhere and rushing round and down, and then that takes time to work its way back to the channel and the friction of all the vegetation on the channel. So they do have an impact. Yeah.
Oh. There are a couple of questions next, which I'll be very, very surprised if you're able to answer, but it just shows what people are thinking, how keen they are. First one is, when will DEFRA give permission for enclosures to be removed?
I think a decision needs to be reached at some point in the near future. There's only so long that there's only, you know, beavers are the only accepted native species in the country that has to be kept sort of behind bars. There's only so many licenses you can give to trials and enclosures. You know, they're all going to be getting to capacity at some point. So a decision one way or the other has to be made soon, I would suggest, but I have no inside knowledge of when that might be.
No, I doubt anybody does. We'll come on to that sort of hopefully when there are plenty in a moment, but another one that I'll be very impressed if you can answer other than the most likely theory. Why did beavers become extinct in this country in the first place?
It was due to man, yeah, persecution. So persecuted for their fur, and also for the meat they were eaten. You could eat, yeah. So and also for the oil that they secrete, the castoreum was used in perfumes and flavoring, vanilla ice cream of all things, with beaver anal fluid. So yeah, they were
I've been
hunted.
offered 99 or nuts and things on the top before, never beaver anal fluid on an ice cream.
Yeah, so it was man, and the last beaver, the last written record of a beaver is in Yorkshire on the River Wharfe, and it was of in a churchwarden's sort of diary paying 2D for a beaver head. That's the last written record. 1670.
Hopefully we won't go back there. And if we do get wild release and populations become well established, you mentioned without the larger predators, do you think other controls may be needed at that point? How could that work if we get to the wonderful position that all the watercourses are full and there's nowhere for them to go?
So I think there is no denying it. Without a natural predator, humans will have to control, lethal control will have to be part of the picture. Beavers in the right place are fantastic, but beavers, because they change their environment significantly, can cause issues for some landowners and some land users and practices, and there's no denying that. So lethal control, I feel, should be part of the solution, but quite a long way down the solution. So can we help people to live with beavers by using mitigation methods, such as putting pipes in dams to keep water levels at certain height, encouraging practices to leave space for rivers. And if that's not an answer, then relocation. If there's nowhere to relocate them to, then it may be that lethal control is the answer, but it should not be the first answer. And we've got a lot of capacity to fill before that should be the answer, in my opinion.
Thank you. And for those that are less positive about beavers, do you tend to find that after a discussion and things like mitigation is raised, they're more amenable, or are there some that are just implacably don't want them?
I think yeah, there's a mixture of both. The majority of the people who have been to the enclosure and heard what the beavers can do and seen what they've done in their eyes, quite a lot have changed their perception on beavers. Quite a lot have the opinion that beavers are fantastic. And then there's that other ground that beavers are fantastic, but kind of not, they wouldn't live alongside what how I use my land. And then there's been one really sort of skeptical, negative person in the whole 5 years. There's just been one sort of very negative, which was quite good.
That is impressive over that time. A number of people have expressed that question that I put as, the farmers not like it, essentially, but we try very hard in Warren not to just categorize whole groups of people, which is why I kind of asked, are there some that are more pro and more anti?
It's people who have their livelihood, their livelihood and their income rely on land, and if the beavers are going to have an impact on their livelihood and income, then you can accept that they may not be as happy as someone who doesn't depend on that land for their livelihood.
Yeah, great. I haven't kept a check on the chat function because we did ask people to put questions into the Q&A. So I think I've covered, or Cath has herself covered everything that was in the Q&A. So I'm gonna move in a minute just to start tying things up and just having a quick scan through. No, definitely the most enthusiastic responses were when you put the videos on. Not too much of a surprise.
No, it's still the show.
Yeah, yeah. So just to begin to wrap things up from YRN's viewpoint, as John said at the start, we are almost entirely dependent on donations. We're fortunate to have had some grants from a number of people, most notably Rewilding Britain, which we're really grateful for. But if you have enjoyed this evening and would like to make a small donation, we would really appreciate it. You can do that via our website, by text, or with the QR code you see here. And also, as John mentioned, on the reintroductions theme continuing, early in the new year, 7th of January, we'll have a presentation by Cath Bashforth, who's been with the South of Scotland Golden Eagle Project for the last 5 or so years, and is involved, as I now am, in setting up a new charity to extend its work into Northern England, which just makes me go flaky. I think it would be absolutely marvellous to see a Goldie in Yorkshire at some point. The bottom picture there is one that made it into the 30 images celebrating 30 years of the National Lottery in London a couple of weeks ago. It's one of the feeding stations where the eagles are. So if you like seeing that kind of thing, then please do join us in about 6 weeks, I guess that is. That's scary, isn't it, saying that's the new year, but that's where we're at. We only buy a Zoom license for a month at a time because of the cost of it. So until we bought that, we can't advertise the registration. So middle of December, we should have the registration link up, and we'll let everybody know if you're interested in participating in that one. So just to return to Cath, as I said before the questions, Cath, you've covered lots of slants of the science and the stories and the nature and so on and so on. That has been the best attended YRN webinar that we've done just for YRN. We've done joint ones before with a few more. But thanks ever so much for giving your time up. You coped admirably with the issues around the delays at the start, but all of that came through and we had some great things to look at the time. So thanks ever so much. And I'm torn now because having been to the enclosure twice, I feel like I'm taking somebody's place if I go again. But it is such a magical place. I'd really love to. So maybe we can get some more initial enclosures and then wild beavers out around Yorkshire. I'll leave the webinar open for a minute or two just for those that are still putting things in the chat. Unsurprisingly, Cath, they're really appreciative. So thanks to you. Thanks also to John for setting things up and for doing the intro. And watch out for more from YRN, both in webinars and our newsletter early in the new year. I'm not sure, we might send out something pre-Christmas, and I'm definitely not going there with Christmas wishes because it's only November. So enjoy the rest of your evenings. Thanks for joining, and we hope to see you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you.